Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, An Egyptian Anecdote. Akhnaton, the very controversial and very famous, actually, pharaoh. The pharaoh that called for monotheism. The first one to call for monotheism, not only in ancient Egypt, but maybe all around the world. But was he only a king? Or was he much more than that? What is the relationship between him and some religious figures, just such as the prophet Moses or the prophet Enoch? Did he have any relation, that connected him to them? Was he one of them? Also, was he 100% human? Or was he an alien or an extraterrestrial? Was he a reformer or was he a dissident rogue? To shed more light on the life of Akhnaton, I'm really delighted to be accompanied today by Naveen Ashur, who is a scholar in ancient Egyptian history. Naveen, hello and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Hello.
It's a pleasure to have you. And to start off, Naveen, can you tell me why do you think that Akhnaton was and still is a very important and controversial pharaoh? Why do you think he is of that great importance?
I think Akhnaton was very important because he was the first one to talk about monotheism. Although it was like a social revolution or movement against the monks and the priests of the temples of Ammon, but it was taken as he was the first one to speak about monotheism in the ancient history, and this wasn't right, but it's always being argued and thought that he was a prophet or he was the first one to talk about monotheism.
Can you shed some light? Can you tell us a little bit about his time, his era, like the environment in which he grew up, his family, his parents? How was Egypt like during his time?
Well, first his father, Akhnaton III, he was a very rich king, and he was interested in pleasure and having living life the way he wants, and he was always getting married to a lot of women, but his wife, Queen T, she was the daughter of Yoya, one of the officials, and her mother Toya was a singer in one of the temples. She wasn't the way her husband was, and she was interested in bringing her son better than his father. So she gave him, that's what I really heard, she gave him to her uncle, her brother, to bring him up away from the priests and the power they have over the temples, over the income of the country. And when he grew up, he had the feeling that it's not right to let them do whatever they want, and that's what he did when he took the throne.
Absolutely. So we can say that he grew up in a rich, prosperous Egypt because his father was a very successful and strong and dominating king. But at the same time, his own bringing up was very liberal because of his mother and his uncle. So he had a mix of both.
And his father wasn't interested in wars and in expanding the country as well as his father's. So he didn't have the chance to join his father in wars or being in the time of wars. The country was rich and he was brought in this environment.
So in a very peaceful environment, very prosperous environment, very liberal environment as well. And so Akhnaton is known to have called for the worship of one God. Um, can you shed more light about his God?
Yeah.
How did he see God? How did Akhnaton see Aten or God?
Okay, first of all, Aton wasn't invented by Akhnaton. It was already existing from the Middle Kingdom, and his father built some of the temples for Aton inside the Karnak. As the monks was taking all the profits of the offerings given to the temples, he wasn't happy with that. So he decided to give the power for another god who wasn't of the interest of them. So he decided to leave the religion of his fathers and start to worship Aton. When they got angry because the offerings were always going to Aton, not to other monks, he was very angry. He closed the Karnak and he decided to leave Thebes completely, and he chose another place that was Tel El Amarna now. It was his new town or new capital, and he left Thebes and he built his capital there, and
so
he built also.
We can say that the priests and the monks in Thebes, they were following Ammon and to receive a lot of offerings for Ammon, and they were benefiting from this profit and this prestige. So what Akhnaton did, he wasn't very happy with their control of the masses of the people. So
controlling everything, the country and the king, the decisions and the income of the country, and he wasn't happy with that. So he decided to stop them by doing this. Although he was depicted in the Osirian position, that means he didn't leave all the religions or all the gods completely, but he wanted to make them make rules for them or stop them to being controlling him.
Okay, so we can say that he did not completely abolish the worship of other gods or deities. He just brought up a new god along with them. So he did not completely abolish the worship of any other gods. It was okay to worship other gods and deities with Aten.
Yes, and yes, that's what happened. And also, Nefertiti was depicted standing behind them and wearing the Hathor crown, which means that Hathor was also being worshipped while his reign. But he wanted to make it as a major god who is he was the only link between that god and the people, and he wanted to make stop the monks from controlling him and take their power by this movement.
So it wasn't really what upset the monks or the priests wasn't a theological or a religious reason. Rather, it was more an economic or a political reason. So they lost their economic and political grip over the people. So they had a very tight one. So when he loosened their grip, they started to revolt against him.
Yeah, because of course he didn't take offerings from people to Aton and kept those offerings for himself. He used to give the people, opposite to what the other monks used to do. They used to take offerings and money from people and they kept that to themselves So they were very rich, while people were not that comfortable.
But on the other hand, you're saying that Akhnaton, instead of taking, he started giving out things to people.
Yeah.
So he started giving money to people instead of just, draining
Yeah.
them financially and economically. So some people say that because of Akhnaton, there was a civil war in Egypt. Is this really correct? Was there a real civil war between the people of Egypt, or was it just something between the elite, between just the pharaoh and the priests?
Not the elites and the priests. They were angry, but people know they took it as it was like a relief of being oppressed by the monks and the priests, to always have to give to the temples and to the gods. So it was relief for them. It was really better. That's why a lot of people followed that.
So he had a very, it was a popular call. It was a popular religion during his time. So he reached everyone. So it wasn't only something for the elite. The people followed him willingly, not by force. So he did not force people to...
Mostly the poor people or the commons followed that, but the elite, not all the elite, of course, but most of them was benefiting from the offerings somehow, so they were not with him, but some were supporting him, and the commons supported his movement. Mm-hmm. And it was a social movement more than a religious change.
So he was sort of a reformer, again, a social reformer as well, not only in terms of... Now,
it should be taken like that, yes.
If we compare the worship of Ammon and the worship of Aten, are there any obvious, real differences between the religion of Ammon and the religion of Aten, or is it just the separation, of, if you like, temple and state? So was there a real difference in the belief itself between Ammon and Aten?
I think the
pillars of the religion, or what the religion called for.
Of course, all gods are taking care of the subjects, and they are giving life and giving whatever the people need. But the way of depicting the gods, it was the god Aton was always depicted as the disk of the sun, and never in a body, or in like animals or a human body, or as we used to see Sekhmet, the lioness with the body of a woman, or Hathor also was depicted as a cow, or a woman with the head of a cow or the horns of a cow. It was always depicted as the sun disk. This is the difference. Also, he had no priests, no one to connect people with the god but him. He was the only connection between them. And of course, the offering was a very unique thing. All the gods used to, not to take, but people was always told that gods need offerings from them to give them their demands, while Akhnaton didn't ask for that, and his god didn't ask for any offerings. I think the sun disk was always depicted like the rays are touching people or touching the king, and giving him compassion and care.
Like a tender God, a tender, loving God, caring God, and a God that gives, doesn't take. Actually, it's looking to support people rather than, just take everything they have. So with Akhnaton, he was married to a very famous woman who was Nefertiti, who was considered one of the most famous women in ancient Egypt. What was the role of women in his new religion? How was the relationship between Akhnaton and Nefertiti?
It was a very nice relationship because she was always depicted with him. She was always drawn, or the pictures of him. She was always there, and she was always supporting him. His daughters also were supporting him, and he was giving them love and touching them in most of his statues or slabs for Akhnaton. Of course, he got the power of doing this from her support, or else he wouldn't do that. Change the religion, change the God, and change the capital. All of that was done by only by himself and her support with him. So she was very important. Although when his mother visited them, she disappeared from the picture. And this is really very strange.
So when the Queen T, or like the Mother Queen T, visited the mother-in-law, when the mother-in-law came, then Nefertiti disappeared from the picture.
Well, his mother maybe she noticed that the country was getting weak and the borders were invaded by other kings from kingdoms surrounding Egypt. So she was worried, and she started to ask him to give more attention to the political and the political position of the country, and to see what's going around Egypt. Maybe this wasn't a point of disagreement between Nefertiti and her mother-in-law.
And until Akhenaten died, did he keep this religion alive? Did he keep it until the very last days? And about his death, did he die of a natural cause? Was he assassinated? Because there are some stories that are told here and there about his death.
I think no, he died by maybe by age or by some kind of illness, but it wasn't mentioned that he was killed or something. Nothing is sure, and his mummy doesn't indicate any kind of killing or something like that. And of course, he kept the religion to the last day of his life. Also, his son Tutankhamun, he was first called Tutankhaton, and he kept the name for about 2 or 3 years. Then he changed it back to Tutankhamun. So the religion of the...
And we'll definitely go deeper about Tutankhamun in our next...
but I mean, he kept the religion to the last day of his life, and it was continuing some years after his death.
After his death, absolutely.
Not long, but it was still going on.
Absolutely. And how about Nefertiti? Like, did she rule after him? Did she, disguise in as a pharaoh, as a male pharaoh, after he died, and she took over? Is that true?
Some say that, but there's no particular
evidence.
Or it's not. It wasn't asserted that she was the one who ruled after him as a man. In fact, she disappeared from the stage before his death, some years before his death. Maybe she was in the shadow, and she first left the palace and lived in another palace. She didn't die before him. It wasn't mentioned that she did. She died before his death, but maybe she was only waiting his death to rule in a man's position or a man's cover.
And some people say that Akhnaton was actually a prophet. He might have been the prophet Moses, the prophet Enoch, or he might at least have, might have had a relationship with Moses or with Enoch. To what extent do you believe this?
No, I don't think he was a prophet or he was in a relation with prophets. He was a king, and he thought by this he's doing the right for his, maybe himself more than for the country. But I don't think it, because prophets are they have some features. We cannot find this in Akhnaton. That's what I think.
So you think he lacked the most important features of a prophet. So you don't really believe that he was either Moses or Enoch, or he had a relationship between, there is, because some people
No, I don't think so.
He was not himself a prophet, but the prophet Moses was one of his followers before he received divine revelation. So when Moses was young, in the house of Pharaoh, he followed Akhnaton's religion, and then later on he received divine revelation. Do you believe something like this, or no again?
I don't think he was.
You don't really believe this story. Another thing that people say about Akhnaton is that he was an extraterrestrial, especially because of his skull, his facial features. He had this very long and narrow face. Some people say it wasn't only him, but even his family. So do you believe this? Because his face looks quite different from many other pharaohs.
Yes, he's different, but I think a lot of men from Upper Egypt look the same. I see the features of his face on other Egyptians nowadays also, not only back then. I think a lot of men look near to that shape of the face. I don't think he was an alien or something. Akhnaton was just a human. He wasn't an alien, but it's a very strange thing to say so,
because pharaohs before him and after him had different faces. That's why. Was this like a school of art, maybe? Was this...
Yes, this is what was said. It was a school of art. Why was that way? Why did they follow this this style? It's very strange. I believe that, but it was said that it was meant to make Akhnaton like the combine between the man and woman, the male and female, because he was representing the God in himself. That's why he was like this.
So he would be sort of a neuter, so neither feminine nor masculine, because a god has no gender, so he would be somewhere in between. So he would take some feminine features as well in the way he looks.
In the lower part of his body, it was feminine, and in the upper part, it was the masculine. And this is what was said. I'm not sure of that, of course, but and the feature of the Lamarna art is usually following this
style.
Realistic, yes, the realistic style. Yeah.
Yeah. So realism. And last but not least, what is left of his legacy today? What kind of, do we have temples, like papyri? Do we have what is left? Statues.
His mummy, of course, it was found a lot of statues and a lot of slabs. The site of his palace and Tal al Amarna is existing. A lot of the buildings were demolished, but it's still existing and can be visited. There is a very nice part of his legacy in the Egyptian Museum in Tahrir, and also it will be a main part in the new museum. In the atrium of the Egyptian Museum, the floor of his palace is put there, and we can see the drawings and the style of feeling of the nature inside the palace. It was very, very unique and very beautiful. A lot of things of Akhnaton are still existing. Of course, the workshops where they making the statues still existing and can be visited also. And the head of Nefertiti, the most famous piece of art, still existing. And the arguments about him and monotheism, of course, this is also one of the most existing things that are left for us from Akhnaton.
Naveen Ashur, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you very much, and really looking forward to having you again in the program.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, if we were to come to a conclusion here, Akhnaton was, still is, and probably will always be a very controversial and a very important pharaoh. He was definitely a reformer, someone who called, so as we saw, it was not just a religious reform. He just wanted to loosen the tight grip of the priests. Definitely, many of the things that he called for during his time are things that we really need today. Dear viewers, until we meet again, please take very good care. Thank you very much for watching.